Howdy folks, Pastor Jim here, and I'm a little annoyed. This is the second time I am attempting to do this video today. I had the first one all filmed and up on YouTube and up on the Facebook page, and then when I went to look over it, which I probably should have done beforehand, it was encoded improperly, and it seems like I need to work on a little bit of figuring out how to make that a little bit of a smoother process. So we're trying a different style today. I'm actually going to use Amanda's camera for this, and I'm back in my swivel chair, so I'm trying not to sway again, but we're gonna try and run through this now for a second time. And so if you saw the video in the 30 seconds that it was up, I apologize for that quality. We're going to try and make things better for you. So I need to talk to you all about the book of Luke, because that's where most of the groups are at. And the Gospel of Luke is interesting. It's interesting because Luke is coming from a different perspective than the other Gospel writers. He's probably the most educated of all the Gospel writers. And why do we know that? Because if you look in the book of Colossians, chapter 4, verse 14, you will see that Luke is referred to as a physician. And so he would have known how to read and write and do all kinds of things that a lot of the other disciples wouldn't have known how to do. Now, I just used the word disciple, which will probably confuse you, because Luke is also not one of the disciples. Just like Mark was not a disciple, Mark was a traveling companion of Peter, who was taught all the things about Jesus by Peter. Luke is actually a traveling companion of Paul, and he's been taught all of the different teachings of Jesus and the history of Jesus by Paul. And there's a 2-year period where Paul is imprisoned in Rome that we believe that we know Luke is with him. And we believe that basically Luke is sitting down with Paul while he's in jail and learning everything to know about Jesus and writing everything down that he can. Let's see here. Other things about Luke. Luke is not only the author of the book of Luke, but also the book of Acts. We know that because at the beginning of Luke, if you look in Luke chapter 1, right at the beginning, there's this little foreword he does to a man named Theophilus, which means friend of God. And he writes basically this account of the tale of the history of Jesus to his friend Theophilus. You hear Mike is screaming in the background, I don't know. But he's excited. We just got him a Donald Duck DVD. But anyways, if you look at the book of Acts, chapter 1, you will see that it begins with Luke saying something along the lines of, "In my former letter to you, Theophilus." So we know that Acts is basically Luke part 2. You get the gospel, and then you get the story of the church via Luke. So Luke's an incredibly important person in the history of the Christian church. Let's see here, talked about him being educated, physician. Yeah, basically when you were going through the other Gospels, I mentioned that in the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew is really focusing on the Jewishness of Jesus. In the Gospel of Mark, Mark focuses a lot on the secretive nature of Jesus. In this case, in the Gospel of Luke, Luke spends a lot of time focusing on the perfection of Jesus and how he fulfills a lot of the expectations of the Messiah. And again, Luke is writing from a more educated place than most of the other New Testament writers. And so what's interesting is you get a lot of words that are used individually in the book of Luke that are only found in the book of Luke. And that just comes from his education. And so he's able to write more eloquently than perhaps Matthew or Mark could have. Luke also expands on certain stories. For example, on day 1, you're supposed to read Luke 1 through the middle of Luke 4. And in that, you will find that you learn more about John the Baptist than pretty much anywhere else in the Bible. If you want to learn about John the Baptist, you go to the book of Luke. You hear about John the Baptist's birth. You hear about his mother's pregnancy, his relationship to Jesus. All kinds of things that you get a lot more detail on than you would in Matthew, Mark, or even John. On day 2, you're reading Luke 4:14 through 9:50. And just a couple of things that I caught in those passages. Luke chapter 6 verse 12, you get a little cheat sheet for who the disciples are. In your Bible it might be called the 12 apostles, but it's the same guys we're talking about here. So if you ever were wondering what the 12 disciples' names were, just go to Luke chapter 6 verse 12 and the ongoing 3 or 4 verses, and you get your cheat sheet there. In Luke chapter 6 verse 27, you get a fascinating discussion from Jesus on what it means to love our enemies. And this is something that should challenge us as Christians. You know, we're called as Christians to love everybody. And Jesus loved us in a way that was undeserved. It was a form of love called agape, which means that there's no strings attached. And in the end, we're called to love others in the same way. We don't wait for others to love us or others to accept us. We're simply called to love because Jesus first loved us. I feel like that's a hymn. It's probably a hymn. Because he first loved me. Someone out there will know which hymn that is. It's not my strong point, folks. Also in day 2, you'll read about the Transfiguration, which is the theme for our lesson for tomorrow in church. And if you're interested, the sermon title is Super Bowl Blackout? Get Jesus. And so think about how the Super Bowl will connect to the story of the Transfiguration. On day 3, which I think is where we should be at this point, just one note is that you get the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10, verse 25. This is a powerful story of how the least expected can become the most helpful. And in the end, Jesus often chooses the least expected to do the greatest work. Sometimes we don't really understand just what an impact this parable would have made, but to give you some context, you know, Samaritans and Jews were enemies. They were enemies. They did not like each other. And so when Jesus is talking about in this story how this Samaritan comes and saves this Jew that's been injured, this is a huge statement he's making, both spiritually and politically. Today, to make a connection to that kind of a story, I mean, I guess in the 80s you could say we could have called it the parable of the good communist. Not that I think, well, I'm not even going to get into the political side of that stuff, but you know, in the 80s there was all that America, or I guess in the 50s especially, there's all that America versus communism kind of thing. And so, you know, the equivalent to this story would have been the parable of the good communist. There's going to be a communist somewhere who sees this, like, he hates communists. Jesus calls me to love everybody. Going back to that love stuff we talked about just about 30 seconds ago. I guess, you know, a modern day example could be if you told the story from the perspective of the parable of the good Taliban, which sounds really weird coming out of my mouth, and I'm sure sounded really weird when Jesus talked about the parable of the Good Samaritan. That's the kind of experience that the disciples and those who were following Jesus would have had. I mean, this is a substantial difference from the way the world typically thought that he was offering to his people. So I just want to give you a little context for that story. With that being said, I'll stop there for the Luke discussion for today, and I'll finish that up tomorrow and Monday some. Couple of announcements. First is, in case you were looking for a video yesterday, just as a reminder, Fridays are my Sabbath, and as much as I really do enjoy doing these, I actually almost tried to do one yesterday, and my beloved partner in life, Amanda, who's an accountability partner to me, she made it clear, you know, you don't do work today, you rest for God. And I'm glad that I have someone to support me like that. So, with that being said, you will probably be getting a video tomorrow just because of the nature of going through Luke. Also, as an announcement, this coming Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, 7 p.m. at Locust Street, the Life Campus. In the upstairs in the sanctuary, we'll be having worship at 7 p.m. for Ash Wednesday. If you've never been to an Ash Wednesday service, it's the time to kick off the season of Lent. And if you haven't been thinking about what you're giving up for this season, now's the time to do it. That begins this Wednesday. Another announcement is, I had mentioned before that the dates for our community restoration project were June 24th to the 28th. We have to tweak those a little bit because something I completely forgot about is that we had the 150th anniversary of the burning of the bridge here in Wrightsville, and that's on the 28th. And actually, I I know Locust Street's definitely participating in it because they got hit by the cannonball, and we still have our cannonball. So the boroughs asked us to display that that day. But because of that, we're going to have to cut back the restoration week one day. So now it's not the 24th to the 28th, it's going to be the 24th through the 27th. So it's the same week, we're just eliminating that Friday date. So if you were going to take off work for that, please don't take off Friday, because Monday through Thursday are the days that we're going to be doing the work then. And actually last year we were done pretty much Thursday afternoon, so this one might work out fairly well. We'll see. Otherwise, the only other thing I wanted to share was that I might be doing a couple of videos that'll be exclusive just to YouTube that won't have anything to do with church, so I'm not going to put them on the Wrightsville Hope webpage. I might put them on my personal Facebook, but if you're interested in just keeping up, you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which you can do by just clicking on this video and then looking at where my name is, which is like Copulos, F-U-L. That's what YouTube picked for the name, so I don't know why, but and you can click subscribe on there. So because I'm doing this differently, I have no idea how long this video has gone. It might be half an hour at this point. That's what it feels like, because I already did this once. But otherwise, hope to see you all in church tomorrow, and God bless.